Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once-a-week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss any future episodes, be sure to subscribe to and like us on YouTube, follow and share us on Facebook, and catch all the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and everything else on our Twitter feed. You can find us at Sabres Scoop THW and everything else at the Hockey Writer. And also make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter so you don't miss the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. With that being said, Jordan, please do the introductions for our fans.
Yes, today we are joined by Joe Marino, a contributor for the Charging Buffalo and co host of the Charging Buffalo podcast. You can find him on Twitter at JoeTCBNHL for his takes on the Sabres and why they should be drafting William Eklund at first overall. As he says, his man crush for him cannot get any stronger. How are you tonight, Joe?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're
Just
doing
fine.
pretty good,
Yeah.
you know. We're gonna get a little bit in depth into your William Eklund fandom, as I'm very high on him as well. Brandon, I believe, thinks
That's
he's high on
typical.
him, but he doesn't really believe he's gonna go first overall. So we'll get into that just a little bit later. But first, the biggest news really to come out of this week is Jeff Skinner waiving his no move clause for the expansion draft. And this is giving the Sabres an extra forward spot to likely protect a player like Rasmus Asplund, and the team basically will not be losing anyone of real consequence. So let's just kind of, I have an interesting question to propose here. Is making this choice the type of move that will get Skinner to be liked here more and maybe motivate him heading into next season? I'm seeing a lot of support from the fan base on Skinner at the moment, and rightfully so. I mean, he knows he's not likely getting taken by Seattle anyways, so he's kind of doing the team a solid here. What do you have to say about that, Joe?
Yeah, it's definitely Skinner doing the team a solid. And I'm kind of surprised that they asked him to waive the no move clause, but they definitely made the right choice here because they can protect all three of the young forwards that were on the bubble: Anders Bjork, Tage Thompson, and Rasmus Asplund. So hopefully they don't decide to waste one of those spots on Zemgus Girgensons, but who knows? Girgensons is one of Terry Pagula's favorite players, and he has a lot of say in the day-to-day operations with the team. So who knows? I think they're going to go with protecting Asplund with that last spot, though.
Yeah, you never really know what the Sabres are going to do. They're always going to surprise you. What do you think about this move here from Skinner, Brandon?
I like it. It's a very team-friendly move, and one I was super surprised to see. I know we must all have been, right? Because even in the THW mock draft or mock expansion draft, I thought there was no chance that Skinner was ever going to waive his no move clause, so I just didn't even consider the option. But I mean, the fact that he is very good for the team, and honestly, good on Kevin Adams for even opening up the conversation about that and for actually getting it done. And like you said, Jordan, the likelihood that he's going to be selected by Seattle is pretty close to zero, but hey, you never know in this weird world. So, I mean, it helps the Sabres for sure.
Definitely. And with that in mind, now we can kind of Asplund is going to be protected, right? So, Joe, I'm just curious, who do you think the Sabre is going to be that is selected by Seattle come July 21st?
Part of me thinks it's going to be Gergensons, but I have a hard time believing that they're going to pick a guy up who just missed the whole season with injury and is about $1 million overpaid. So I'm going to go with probably Colin Miller. And also, part of me thinks that don't count out Jake McCabe or Linus Allmark signing a UFA contract with them and then being their selection. Probably more likely McCabe than Allmark because there's lots of good goaltending options for the Kraken. And also, if we're talking about UFAs, Riley Sheahan, if you just want to throw away a pick, Sheahan can be your 13th or 14th forward. He's not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think about that, Brandon?
Yeah, honestly, I'm leaning towards Colin Miller as well, especially now with the situation and probably who's going to be protected. Colin Miller's the likely choice. I mean, and he wouldn't be such a bad pick for Seattle too if they employed him properly, really, like as a sixth defenseman. I really don't think he'd be terrible in that situation. You got to hope it's not Olmark because that's what's tricky with Seattle's a few days early UFA negotiating window. You got to hope that doesn't happen. Um, I don't know if the Sabres have any tricks up their sleeves as far as goalies come. There's still some trades to be made, right? I don't know, but I think it's going to be Colin Miller. What about you, Jordan?
Well, we know Colin Miller's worked for an expansion dream in the expansion team in the past. So I seen as he was selected by the Vegas Golden Knights, and I mean, looking at all the public models that are out there, I mean, before he came to the Sabres, he was a good hockey player, and obviously,
Absolutely.
his feud with Gerard Gallant, sorry, I guess, kind of forced his way out of Vegas, but. As most players do, they typically don't play that well on Buffalo. So I'm curious to see if he could rebound his whole career in Seattle. Just a change of scenery could help him there. And yeah, I'm going to go with Colin Miller as my expansion pick as well, because it's going to be interesting to see how they structure their salary in Seattle, because obviously that's a lot of money to be paying, especially if he's playing on your third pair. But the good news is they have $0 on their cap at the moment, so they can work it however the way Ron Francis wants to.
Exactly. They got to hit the floor somehow. They got to hit the cap floor. So we'll see. We'll see. But hey, the expansion draft isn't the only big thing coming up, and it's coming up quickly. A few days after that, we got the entry draft. So, like we prefaced in the intro, let's talk William Eklund and let's compare a little bit here. So, you, Joe, are very fond of this player. Jordan, you as well. I've turned a corner a little bit, but I still am not sure if he should go first overall. But hey, the Sabres are high on him. Adams has said so much himself, and it remains to be seen if they take him at first overall. It's up to them. But here's a question, plain and simple. Is his ceiling as an NHL player higher than Owen Power and Matt Beniers, in your opinion, Joe? I'll go to you first.
I think that Eklund and Power indeed have the two highest ceilings in this draft. I do give the slight edge to Eklund, though, because you see what he's doing, what he did in his draft year in Sweden. Not many players in the past 20 years have accomplished what Eklund has done. Off the top of my head, I know Elias Lindholm, Nick Backstrom, and the Sedin twins, and I think Robert Nilsson. He was like the only like outlier there that outproduced William Eklund in their draft years. And there's some really, really good players that Eklund has outproduced in draft years. And also taking into account he had COVID, he couldn't play in the World Junior. If he played in the World Junior, I think that we're talking about this guy's the consensus number one pick. He would have lit it up without a doubt in my mind. And I like to think of it this way. This draft, it gets crapped on quite a bit for being not having that elite level talent like years past. Last year, Alexander Holtz, Lucas Raymond, both widely considered top 5, top 10 picks. They both go in the top 7. Eklund outproduced both of them. This year, but when comparing them, it's their draft plus 1 year. This is Eklund's draft year. He outproduced them last year and this year. So that says a lot about him as a prospect. I think he's going to lead the Swedish Hockey League in points next year. I think he's going to be on the World Junior All-Star team. And I think a year from now, we're going to be talking about him pre-draft as the best prospect outside the NHL. Take it to the bank.
Yeah, that's a heck of an endorsement right there. We got to keep the receipt on that one. Jordan, you got anything similar? Maybe something different?
Well, definitely a lot of praise there, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
I mean, he outproduced Nick Backstrom in his draft year, which is quite incredible. Obviously, just looking at certain metrics and looking at the NHL E model that comes from Top Down Hockey, Eklund is rated as the best prospect available in this draft. And even just looking at other various models that rank prospects, he ranks very highly on those too. So I trust those models. I trust what I've seen with my eyes, just watching him play. I do think he has the highest ceiling out of all of these players, and that's what the Sabres should be looking for. I mean, none of these guys really are going to be playing next year. They shouldn't, at least, and by all indications, Power and Beniers are going back to Michigan. Eklund is likely going to be developing in Sweden another year. So if you're drafting for ceiling, which you always should be, you should be going with William Eklund, in my opinion, because I think he's going to be the best player out of these three.
There we go. And hey, there's been talk of him going at number 1 overall, but if the Sabres don't select him, I'm not really sure where he goes. But let's, I know you and me, Jordan, we've talked about this a little bit. The Sabres, if they were to trade Jack Eichel and or Sam Reinhart, let's say they're both gone, Risto's gone, whatever, the likelihood that they can get a top 10 pick, another one in this draft back for one of those players is pretty high. We're talking Eichel, of course. Another top 10 pick, let's call it like 3. We've played around with 3, we've played around with 5. If they get 3 or 5 in addition to the first overall pick, are they going with one of Power, Beniers, and Eklund? Are they getting both those players? We'll go to Joe first.
I think in this scenario, I would pick Power first because I don't think the Kraken are going to pick Eklund over Beniers. Because if I'm putting myself in Ron Francis's shoes, I want to start with a center as my franchise corner piece in Matt Beniers, and I have Beniers second on my board. I think he's right there with Eklund for me. I give the slight edge to Eklund because I think he's got a much higher ceiling. But if we're talking right now, I think Beniers is just as good of a prospect, but I give the edge to Eklund. So I think for that reason, I go Power first, Eklund third. If you pick Eklund first, I don't think you're getting Power. And I think there is a gap between Power and the rest of the defensemen right now.
Interesting. Yeah. Jordan?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Joe's scenario there. The only way this could potentially change is if this is kind of like the 2013 draft, which Brandon always brings up, where
Yeah.
Seth Jones, who was the consensus first overall pick for the whole year, dropped the fourth overall. I wonder if we see something similar like that with Owen Power. But I mean, with the draft so close, it's pretty unlikely to think the Sabres will be able to acquire a top 10 pick, especially with the roster freeze coming soon. But we never know. So I would say you would probably draft Power first if that's who you're going for, and then William Eklund with the third or whatever pick you can potentially acquire him with.
Yeah.
And with that, we got some notes here because Darren Dreger on Insider Trading is reporting that the Minnesota Wild will be making an offer for Jack Eichel. That's a pretty bold statement, but it's quite likely after, we saw them buy out the contracts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. So let's just go over this. What does that offer for Jack Eichel consist of if you're the Wild? Is Marco Rossi or Matt Boldy going to be the centerpiece of that deal? Let's start with you, Joe.
I think they have to be at least one of them. If you can get both, that'd be great. But yeah, if I'm Kevin Adams, I'm asking for Marco Rossi as the centerpiece of this trade. I think he's probably. I know a lot of people want Trevor Zegras from Anaheim in a Jack Eichel trade, but I think Marco Rossi's right there. If my memory serves me correct, I think I had Rossi as my third best prospect in last year's draft, and he ended up going. I think he went ninth, right? Yeah, one
He
pick
went
right
ninth.
after Buffalo.
Right after Quinn.
Right after Jack Quinn. That's correct.
Yeah. I really wanted Marco Rossi last year. This is bringing back some bad memories for me, but yeah, Rossi would be the guy. I like Boldy a lot too. I think he is definitely an elite prospect. He definitely had a really strong season this year. I think he's going to be a really good player for many years to come. But the Wild have a lot to offer in a Jack Eichel trade. And I listened back to Travis Yost's segment on WGR from yesterday, talking about a Kirill Kaprizov for Jack Eichel trade. I don't think Minnesota does that because of just the sheer presence that he had for the Wild this year, but that would be some sort of trade, Kaprizov for Eichel. I'd never thought about it, but until today, I was like, oh, that seems like a pretty fun idea, but I don't think that happens. You're probably getting prospects and picks.
I mean, that would definitely be a fun idea, but I think they're going to need Jack Eichel so he can play with Kirill Kaprizov and give him that superstar center.
Yeah.
And that'd be the main concept of that deal. What do you think, Brandon? Would you presume that Rossi or Boldy are going to be the centerpiece of this trade on top of the three assets that they're probably going to have to add to that?
They've got to, right? And I don't know if it's too much of an asking price, but I would be kicking the tires on Capo Kakkonen, the goaltender. I think that the Sabres got to be looking to acquire a goalie somehow, and like a true starting goalie, right, for now and in the future. And what better way to do that than by saying, hey, we're giving you Jack Eichel, so come on, cough it up a little bit. So maybe, I don't know if that's too much if Marco Rossi and Kakkonen are involved, or even like we've heard Matt Dumba's name swirled around trade rumors forever. I don't know what the deal is going on with him, but the Wild have plenty of defensemen as well. They also just pick some prospects that they can give. But I would be interested in a goaltender, and I think Kakkonen is an interesting name. But as far as forwards, yeah, it's Marco Rossi for me.
Well, it's very interesting here because I wonder if this would be a short-term move for the Wild if they really did go all in for Eichel. Because I'm sure as every hockey fan has seen, the dead cap in those buyouts include a combined $12.74 million against the cap in 2022-23 and $14.6 million of dead cap in 2023-24 and 2024-25. So in those years, that's going to be really hammering them. But next year, they get that extra $10 million of salary cap. because of these buyouts. And guess what? Jack Eichel makes $10 million. So it actually fits right there perfectly. I just wonder, do you think the Wild are just going to plan on trying to win the Stanley Cup next season if they really do? And do you think they really should be going after Jack Eichel? I'll start with you, Joe.
Yeah, why not go all in after the year you just had? For weeks now, I've been saying that the Wild make the most sense for a Jack Eichel trade, mainly because of the elite prospects that they have. They have 2 first-round picks this year. They have their picks next year and the year after. Why not go all in? You just had Kirill Kaprizov win the Calder Trophy. You have a good, promising young core. Capo Kakinen, a promising young goalie too. Why not go all in?
Definitely. Would you echo that statement, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's their plan, right? They're gonna have to, because you mentioned how handcuffed they're gonna be with that dead cap space, after next season. And so picking up a player with a 10 million year contract for the next, what is it, 5 seasons left on Eichel's contract, that's a steep asking price. And especially because these past 2 seasons with COVID have been so weird and the cap is probably going to hover around 81, that's going to be really tough for you to navigate and sign some of the good young players that you might have to sign in a few years. So why not go all in? They took Vegas to 7 games. I thought they were almost going to win that series. It's not like if they, faced a really hard team, they couldn't overcome that. They could. So maybe they do. That would be exciting for sure.
It's just going to be hilarious if the Sabres actually acquire Rossi, because every Sabres fan is going to complain that they could have just selected him over Jack Quinn. But at least, hey, you could get the 2 former line mates potentially playing together. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. And so let's just head into this here, Joe. We're going to now talk a little bit more of the draft, but there's more to it than just the first overall pick. I want to know who are some of the players you see the Sabres selecting with the other 2 second-round picks that they have in this draft? Who are some guys you're keeping your eye on?
Now, with the 33rd overall pick, which is essentially a first-round pick, it's a 32nd pick in the draft because of Arizona forfeiting the 11th pick. It's basically a first-round pick, and with such a weird draft year that this was, you're going to be seeing a lot of quality players slide to the Sabres 33rd overall pick. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think Aatu Räty is going to be available with a 33rd pick. And I think if he's there, I wouldn't be surprised if the Sabres pick him. And if your memory goes back a little bit, a year ago, consensus number 1 overall pick, had a really poor draft year, didn't make the World Junior team. Very limited offensive upside, but I see this guy being a dominant penalty killer for many years to come. I think I would call him a project, but I could see him 3-4 years time being a nice second line center for whatever team picks him. I could see him going anywhere from like 15 to 35. Who knows? This draft is such a wild card, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if he's available. And there's more guys that are supposed to go in the first round. Like, I was looking at the Charging Buffalo draft guide that's going to be dropping at some point early next week, I believe. 25,000 words, by the way. You can get it for free. Definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. Brennan Hoffman. Yeah, that's the name. He plays for the Flint Firebirds, but obviously the OHL didn't play this year. But we got to see a little glimpse of him at the World Under-18s. Extremely skilled player. You're going to see some really skilled, more undersized players slide. We see it every year. It happens. They go early in the second round, and the teams look like geniuses for picking them. Samu Salmonen. Is it Salmonen? I want to double check to make sure. Sorry.
No worries.
I'm not positive. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Samu Salmonen. His first name's Samu. Sorry for my memory here. But he's like not the greatest skater, but a really good goal scorer. He's supposed to go late first, early second round. Think Arthur Kaliev kind of, but not as deadly of a release. I think he's definitely an option for the Sabres in the early second round. And one more, I'm going to have to go with Mackie Samoskevich. Really good dynamic forward. I'm just going to throw out a couple more here. There's so many players that I like for the early second round. I think the Sabres are going to get a really good pick here. Logan Stankoven is the guy I really, really hope that they can get. Again, undersized forward, but He's got a deadly release, extremely good skater. I think he would fit in really well with the youth movement that the Sabres are trying to go for.
Yeah.
And, a goalie, Sebastian Cossa, he's supposed to go in the top 10 now. I've seen mock drafts have him go from 10, but who knows? We've seen goaltenders slide all over the place. If he's available with the first pick in the second round, I think, hey, why not take a flyer on him?
Yeah, I mean, even looking back at 2020, right? Like everybody scrutinized the Sabres over the Quinn pick, but if you look at their rounds 2 to 7, it's actually pretty solid looking at those players have developed. Like JJ Peterka was such an amazing pick, not only for his play at the World Juniors with Tim Stützle, but I was looking at some charts from his play in the DEL, and he like really dominated there. And I think he's going to be a middle six contributor and potentially even 2 seasons from now. I could see him being a guy that could come in on his ELC and play with the team. A guy like Albert Linkason, who was selected in the 6th round as well. I'm really high on that guy as well. I think he could definitely be an NHL player there.
So to clarify, that was Samu Tuamala, the player
There
that I
we
was
go.
talking about earlier.
Very close.
I'm pretty sure there was a Salmonen in this draft. I think I got the names messed up.
I'm sure there is. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you make a good point. I mean, that's the thing about this draft, right? Is there are a lot of players who don't have a body of work in the last year. And so there's going to be some tremendous talent that slides to the second and even the later rounds. And I think in 5 to 10 years time, you're going to look back on this draft and be like, wow, there were some gems. But let's just see if the Sabres can draft and develop as well as we hope they can. One fun thought project before we move on to some general NHL news here about the Sabres. Let's play a little game because we talked about the expansion. We talked about some players who might be walking or traded, whatever. Which Sabres, I'm going to throw out a few names. You can even include some others. Which Sabres will suit up in game 1 of the regular season next season? I'll throw out 4. You guys can add to it. I'm going to throw out Risto, Reinhardt, McCabe, and Ullmark. Let's go to you, Joe.
This is players who won't be here next year or will be here next year?
Will. So out of any of those. Yeah.
Part of me thinks Sam Reinhardt's going to be on the team next year. I don't know about the other ones. I think Risto will be here too. I think he'll go at the deadline. Because if you think about it, they're probably going to lose either Miller or Borgen. I think I forgot to mention Borgen in the beginning of the episode. But you look at the Sabres' right side of their defense, you got Jokiharju, Risto, Borgen, Miller. You're going to lose one of those guys, maybe 2. You're pretty thin. So I could see a case where they end up keeping Ristolainen and just saying like, okay, maybe we can get a better return for him at the trade deadline. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I mentioned it earlier. One of Terry Pagula's favorite players, Rasmus Ristolainen. He's here to stay. Unless they're getting a really good return, like we're talking like a 1st-round pick, 2nd-round pick, and a young roster player, I think he's going to be here to stay. And I would think Reinhardt's probably just going to go to arbitration, take a 1-year deal, and then get traded at the deadline too. Should be an active trade deadline for the Sabres next year.
Yeah, it definitely should be. And out of those names, I mean, I know we have heard now recently that it sounds like the Sabres want to keep Ristolainen still, and I'm shocked that they won't just rip the Band-Aid off at this point. But they're still keeping him. McCabe, I would be pretty shocked if he does come back at this point. Even though before his injury, that Ristolainen and McCabe pairing was actually providing positive results for the team. So at least in the first 10 games, I should say. I think it kind of went downhill after that, but there was a little sample size where they actually didn't look too bad. Sam Reinhardt's obviously an interesting one because they could go that route, which they did last year as well, and reward him. He'll get rewarded a 1-year contract. I just don't know though. He sounds like a player that doesn't really want to be here at the moment, and Kevin Adams definitely wants guys that wants to be here.
Unless you're Rasmus Ristolainen.
Yeah, unless you're Rasmus Ristolainen, then you got to keep him around, keep him held hostage. But I think Reinhardt isn't going to be on this team next year, and I would love Reinhardt. He's a top 6 2-way winger and terrific finishing ability. I mean, I think it would be a mistake to lose him, but I just get the sense that I think if I'm going to pick another option, I think he's going to be the guy that's gone. I'm going to say Ristolainen's gone, and I think the only one of those 4 names that actually comes back is Linus Ullmark. I think they find a way to keep him.
So. Yeah.
How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, I think honestly, I could see Ristolainen sticking around. I could see Reinhardt sticking around, but I think honestly, I have a weird gut feeling that Reinhardt is more likely to be dealt sooner than Jack Eichel, just on the based on the way things have played out. Might be close to each other, but I think Reinhardt might be gone. So I'll say they keep Bristow, McCabe's gone. They keep Olmark. Maybe he signs a 1 year. Who knows? And then Reinhardt's gone too. I don't know. Yeah, and Eichel obviously I think will be gone as well.
Allmark's a really interesting decision for the team because obviously you want to keep him. You need a goalie. You want to be competitive next year. You don't want to be a laughing stock anymore. I think they're going to be bad. They're probably going to finish in the bottom three, but at least be competitive like they were towards the tail end of the season. So keeping Allmark's important, but how can you commit to him long term when he's only playing like 30% of the season? So that's going to be a tough decision. And put yourself in his shoes. Yeah, you want to be a number one goalie. You probably don't want to stay in Buffalo. You want to look elsewhere, but you go to a team like San Jose, Detroit, Edmonton, they're also going to be like, okay, you want a 5-year, $5 million deal, $4 million deal? I need you to play more than 30, 35 games.
That's
Definitely.
right.
And an interesting thing here is I heard this on another podcast. Jake Allen is going to be exposed in this expansion draft, right? And I wonder if the Sabres try to call up Montreal before the draft and just see if Montreal will just take anything for him and acquire him there. Now, I know you would have to protect him and you would have to leave Allmark exposed, I guess, in that scenario probably. But I feel like there's enough goalies out there that Seattle might not touch Allmark. I know that'd be kind of a risky scenario, but if there's a way you can get Jake Allen for a very cheap price from Montreal, I don't think that's a bad guy to have back there, kind of in a 1A, 1B tandem situation. I think you can do much worse than Allmark and Allen in terms of your goalie tandem.
You can give one of their picks back from the Eric Stahl trade.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. And with that, we can head into our mid of the show plug. So you're watching Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Raiders. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube, follow and share us on Facebook, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeyraiders.com and on our Twitter feed at Sabres Scoop THW. Brandon, some crazy general NHL news for this week. Lots of stuff happening in the National Hockey League.
Yeah. Hey, let's start off with something fun. Our favorite NBC analyst, Pierre Maguire, was hired by the Ottawa Senators as the senior VP of player development this past week. You know what? Like I said, I get a lot of gut feelings, and I had a gut feeling that Pierre would be the first person who doesn't have a job from NBC to go and get a job in the NHL. Remember last time the Penguins had a GM opening and Pierre Maguire was this close to getting it? So yeah, I'm not surprised, but let's just break it down a little bit. Senior VP of player development for the Sens. Do we think he's suitable for this job? Is he a good fit? Considering he hasn't even been in a front office role in the league since 95 when he was an assistant coach. So do we think he's a good fit and is going to be good at this job? Jordan, let's go to you first, actually.
Well, I think this is a pretty easy answer, and I think I can quite confidently say no. Even putting that experience aside, because obviously he's been an analyst and whatever, and he can tell you every player where they're from. He can give you a full background story on them. This guy hasn't really adapted at all, and his hate towards analytics is one thing, but in this type of role, this is kind of a role he's not necessarily even that experienced in. And you're dealing, and this is an Ottawa Senators team that's going through a rebuild. Like, this is very crucial, this having Pierre Maguire in this role. I don't think this is really a great fit at all. And I don't really know what they're doing there. I know it's come out that Eugene Melnick really wanted Pierre Maguire. So that's one thing. I don't know if that gives Sens fans any more confidence here in that statement, but I don't really get this hire at all. I literally think there could be hundreds of other people that better suited for this position. That's what I heard Rachel Dory actually say on her podcast, actually.
Yeah, Joe?
It's always a good day when the dysfunctional spotlight gets taken off of the Buffalo Sabres. So Ottawa does tend to do that from time to time. I think the league is more fun when you have the Pierre Maguire types in front office positions. So I said it on my podcast the other day. I think before the Pierre Maguire hire, I thought Ottawa was a prime destination for Rasmus Ristolainen, and now I think that's even more reinforced now, especially with his hatred for analytics. If he has any real say in that organization, I'm not sure how much power he's going to have. I was listening to 31 Thoughts the other day, the podcast out with Elliot Friedman, And Pierre Dorian, his contract is up next year. So I wonder if they decide to maybe promote Pierre Maguire, if maybe they have a rough start to the year. He gets the can, who knows? But yeah, if Pierre Maguire is a GM, the league's going to be very interesting. I do think it's a weak hire for the Senators, though, especially considering they're rebuilding, and they're at the point now where you're going to want to start acquiring some veteran pieces, and you're going to start to be paying the guys like Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, the young core players like that. You're going to need to get the savvy analytical moves for cheap for your team, and he's going to probably be telling Pierre Dorian to ignore those players.
Yeah, the player development one, that's just such an interesting role, because you got to wonder how much of a hand does he play in the say of who they draft, in even in the upcoming protection list. It's a very crucial offseason for a lot of teams, and like you said, Ottawa's one of them. And yeah, and he's just joining the organization now. They've got to trust him. If the relationship between him and Melnick is good, maybe they know something I don't. But yeah, it's a very interesting time to hire somebody like Pierre. But I heard an interview he did on the radio when he got hired, and he said that he believes in boots on the ground scouting and development. So we'll see what that does for the Sens. And this is a team that I would like to see get better. I would like to see their players develop. I'd like to see them be competitive again. And we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Ottawa's a sneaky playoff pick for next season. I wouldn't be surprised. They
If
had a
Matt
pretty
Murray,
good end.
yeah.
Definitely are, especially with a guy like Josh Norris, who I think should have gotten more Calder consideration this year. Obviously, Kaprizov is great, but that's an underrated player. They're a force defensively. And even if Tim Stützle takes a step, because he wasn't necessarily that great, I know opposed to the baseline stats, he obviously had a fine year. But I think with all of those guys just continuing to get better, they are going to be a better team. And I mean, we're even seeing a player like Eric Branstrom really start to step in. And I think he can maybe even solidify himself as a top 4 defenseman starting next year. So you just have to wonder if they're going to be looking to acquire any veteran pieces or anything like that. How does Pierre Maguire's role play in the organization if they really do attempt to make kind of like a crazy playoff run?
I've seen Claude Giroux connected to Ottawa
I've seen
a couple
that too.
times. I think that would be a smart move for them, because he's only got like 1 or 2 years left on his deal. He's making like $8 million. You got the money for it. I think he's even from Ottawa too, or around the area at least. I think it'd be a smart move. Ottawa's got to bring in some veterans, try and get them over the top. It's their time. You've been drafting, you've been collecting these picks. It's time to use them.
Definitely. And I mean, Philly's a team that looks like they're just going to completely blow it up, because I've heard rumors that Jacob Voracek is going to be left unprotected in this expansion draft. And that's definitely a guy I could see Seattle taking. So I think you're going to be seeing a change in the core in Philly, and hopefully Ottawa uses that to their advantage. And maybe Pierre Maguire actually has a positive impact there and he can help out in some sort of fashion. But we'll definitely have to see how that goes. But we're seeing expansion draft moves already getting made. One made 1 hour before the show even started recording because a trade occurred. Ryan Graves going from the Colorado Avalanche to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for a 2021 second-round pick and prospect Mikhail Maltsev, who played on the Devils' bottom 6 this year, looked quite effective doing so. What are our initial thoughts on this deal? Let's start with you, Joe.
I feel like it's a pretty good return for the Avalanche. Graves is obviously a really nice defenseman, especially good defensively. And how did they get him? They got him from the Rangers.
Yeah.
For
who was it? The guy doesn't even play on the Rangers.
Yeah, he doesn't play in the league. I think he's in the Flyers AHL affiliate now, Lehigh Valley. But yeah, it was a great trade for the Avalanche. They were probably going to lose him to the Kraken in expansion. You get a high second-round pick and a decent bottom 6 forward that might be able to play for you next year. That's a pretty good return. The Devils obviously got a player that you can add. He's still pretty young too. He's probably like 25, 26. He's under contract for a couple more years. He can play on your second pair, hopefully with Rasmus Ristolainen when the Devils trade for him. Fingers crossed. So it's a good move for both sides.
What do you think about that, Brandon?
It's funny you mentioned Risto because I was just going to say cross Risto off New Jersey's list, because they just got their defenseman. I don't know, but yeah, because we had rumored, especially on this show too, we thought Risto might be a good fit in New Jersey, especially if he played less minutes than he does in Buffalo. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good move for both teams. I really do. I know that's a cliche, but I really do think that it's a good move for both teams. And I know you're going to talk about the expansion implications for New Jersey on the back end, Jordan, which are super interesting.
Yeah, I was talking to Alex Chovancy from the Hockey Writers, who's the Devils contributor there, and I asked him what he thinks their expansion, their protection list is going to be kind of after this move, and he thinks it's going to be Ryan Graves, Jonas Siegenthaler, who I think he's a very underrated player as well, and Damien Severson. Sorry, those will be the three defensemen protected at least by the Devils there, and then that would leave PK Subban and Will Butcher exposed to Seattle. So I'm just wondering, guys, out of those two players, because those are most likely one of those guys will likely be the guys Seattle selects, I would have to imagine. Who do you see them taking out of those two players? So Subban's only has 1 year left at his $9 million cap hit. Would definitely be quite a big name player to acquire, even if he's past his prime for Seattle to build an expansion team around. Do you think they take on that cap hit, or do you think they maybe take a player like Will Butcher, who maybe a change of scenery could get him back to putting up the numbers he was in his rookie season? Let's start with you there, Brandon.
I was going to say, Will Butcher once had a lot of teams fighting over him, and now possibly up for expansion. I don't know. I mean, that might be an interesting name, especially if Seattle doesn't want to go the Vegas route and just go, all right, let's sell our future for right now. Let's win a cup in the next 3 years, whatever, 5 years. I don't think Seattle's going to try to do that. So if they're playing the long game, Will Butcher would be smart. At the same time, what better way to generate some buzz around your team than have a guy like PK Subban come in? Such an eccentric personality. Had some fantastic seasons. Used to be in the conversation for the Norris. Obviously, he's had some down seasons. The last one in Nashville, and then the last few in New Jersey. But like you said, it's 1 year. That's low risk. And if they're trying to hit the cap floor, that's one way to do it. So I wouldn't hate either of those.
What do you have to say about that, Joe? Who would you take if you're Seattle from the Devils out of those two players?
I think, like what Brandon said, you're going to need some like superstar level players, a recognizable name. Seattle's just trying to grow their popularity in hockey, generate some fans. The casual fan in Seattle might know who PK Subban is. You're going to want to have some recognizable names when you're building your team. So I think I'm picking Subban. He's got 1 year left, 9 million. You can flip him at the deadline, retain a little bit of money, maybe get another first round pick for a team that's desperate for defense at the trade deadline. He's also a right-handed shot too, which that's important. I haven't done a mock expansion draft in a while, but last time I did it, there weren't that many good right-handed defensemen available. So Subban would be a real no-brainer for the Kraken.
And I just want to say, especially if a guy like Subban gets claimed by Seattle, that definitely opens up the possibility that Ristolainen goes to the Devils, because that opens up a spot right there. And then you can put him in that position. I think he would actually do better in New Jersey just because he would probably get a reduced role there. I always say that. And he could still get some power play time. It'd be an interesting scenario for him. And like I said, I mean, we're going into the ESPN TNT era of the NHL now. So think of all the coverage that Seattle's already going to get. And now they could potentially add PK Subban. And what I would ask is there really that big of a difference between the quality of Subban and Butcher's play that it necessarily warrants picking, Butcher over Subban? Especially if this is just a 1 year scenario and your team likely isn't making the playoffs anyways. I don't know. That's the question they're asking themselves right now. And with that, we can head into the Florida Panthers. Had a busy day today. They're trying to not replicate the expansion draft from Vegas where they completely screwed up. I don't think they're going to do that this year because they bought out Keith Yandel. They did that today, and they also re-signed Gustav Forsling, who's just I'm sure some of you maybe saw Jay Fresh Hockey's model player viz on him, but he's just completely shot up. He's like almost I think he's in the 90 percentile and more that he had this season in Florida. Like he just provided like crazy value. He had like a Mackenzie Weegar like jump. So they signed him to 3 years at a 2.66 million AAV there. They also re-signed Anthony Duclair, 3 years at $3 million. Those are very market value 3-year contracts right there. Very tidy business, as they like to say, for Bill Zito. So I'm just going to throw this out there. Do you see the Panthers continuing to build off last year's success with Bill Zito in charge? Let's start with you, Joe.
I think so. I think it's a crime that Terry and Kim Pagula didn't give this guy an interview after Botterill was fired and just settled for Kevin Adams, because he did a great job with Florida last offseason, starting with the draft, picking Anton Lundell with, was it the 10th or 11th pick? Brilliant. Great year in Finland, great World Junior, great World Championship. Man, like, he's going to be a real stud for them. You got the two Finnish studs down the middle, Barkov and Lundell, for the next for the foreseeable future. Obviously, if they can get Barkov signed next year. Duclair was a great pickup. The guy in Tampa, his name's escaping me. I'm bad with names, if you can tell.
Which guy?
He played for Tampa, didn't get qualified, had a really good year.
Carter Verhaeghe?
Yeah, Carter Verhaeghe. Yeah. Verhaeghe was a great signing, like $1 million for 2 years. That's a no-brainer as well.
Right.
Picking up Montour at the deadline, like, low risk pickup, and he played much better in Florida than Buffalo. And these moves today, buying out Yandel, it seemed like a no-brainer. They save a little bit of money and they're able to keep their guys in house.
They also signed Nikita Gusev at the deadline after his contract termination, and he performed pretty well on that team too, especially. So, I mean, I really like that team, and I did want to reiterate too, I know you mentioned it, but we got to see Anton Lundell play with Arttu Ruotsalainen there at the World Championships with Team Finland. Those two were just such dynamite playing together.
What could have been.
Oh, I know. And I just want to know, do we think he can step in and be that second line center for that team? Because at the moment, they're projected to use Sam Bennett there, who, even I thought they might have overpaid a little bit to get Sam Bennett. He ended up being a point per game player there. So that's their scouting doing justice, figuring out, hey, this is a situation where we can maybe get this former third overall pick to succeed. And look at that, he does. So we'll see if he can replicate that, because obviously it was a short sample size. But do we think Lundell can just steal Bennett's job or maybe force him to play somewhere else because he's going to be that good? I'll start with you, Joe, because you seem to have quite the opinion.
I'd shelter him a little bit, keep him on the third line, rather, and just see where you go from there. I can see him growing into that spot next year, though. But I think keep Bennett on the second line center, see if he can replicate that success that he had in the small sample size from last season, because that's why you got him. You wanted to give him a more expanded role that Calgary couldn't do for him. So see if he can keep that up, and then as the season goes on, maybe Lundell can take that spot.
How about you, Brandon? General thoughts on the Florida Panthers and Anton Lundell and the situation they got going on there?
Yeah, no, I would echo what Joe said, and I totally agree. I mean, I think Sam Bennett performed really well, like you said, pretty much a point per game player, and he had some big moments in the playoffs. Unfortunately, the Panthers weren't able to make it past the reigning champs back to back now. But I mean, I think he really impressed, and let's see what he can do in a full 82 game season. The fact that we're talking about Lundell getting in just so shortly removed from being drafted makes me think like, wow, I hope Jack Quinn develops just as quickly and is able to do something, make a contribution. But that's exciting for the Panthers. And as far as if they're going to take a big step forward next year, I think that step would be winning a playoff series, right? I think they are going to. I think they have finally got things together, build off this fantastic season for them, and just keep going. I think they're going to be a really good team in their division for years to come.
Well, to expand off your point there, Brandon, I'll just add this kind of just before we end off the show. Jack Quinn did make a comment actually to the media I saw, because he just had a hernia surgery and he's recovering nicely from that. But he does believe he's a part of this team's core, and he thinks he could start playing next season. And I mean, if you guys remember, he did make the opening night roster. He didn't play in any games, but that was kind of just his reward for having just for playing good this in the training camp leading up to the season. So I wonder if I have a good feeling, honestly, they're going to give him a 9-game stint just to see how he plays in the NHL. Would you guys tend to agree with that? I could see them at least giving him at least a few games, maybe at the beginning of the year.
Couldn't hurt.
Yeah. I think they'd be really doing him a disservice by playing him on what's going to be a dumpster fire of a team next year.
Yeah.
I think he probably makes the team out of camp. But he's definitely best suited for
It's
Rochester.
definitely not what I would do. But
Yeah.
knowing the
Oh,
Sabre,
yeah. What about putting Dylan Cousins in this past season, though? Do you think, I mean, he didn't have the greatest offensive campaign, but what do you think it did for his development? Honest question. Yeah.
I think it helped, but
Yeah. It's
with
different
Quinn though,
player.
he can go to the AHL. For Cousins, it was WHL or NHL, no in between.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
definitely.
true.
Yeah, I mean, this was a unique season, right? The fact that Jack Quinn even played in the AHL was quite, that would never happen in most years. So they at least got the, and I mean, he did look okay too. He put up 9 points in 15 games there. I know he wasn't necessarily great in some of the metrics there, but that's kind of to be expected. I mean, he still has to develop. He's not a full-time NHL player yet. There's no way. And they shouldn't be playing him full-time until presumably at least starting 2 seasons from now, maybe even 3, because we'll have to see if he really has trained hard this offseason, I guess, and maybe he's can silence some of the doubters like us, because I hope he can do so, because there's a lot of pressure on him.
I like Quinn as a prospect. I really do, but it's Marco Rossi, it's Anton Lundell, Cole Perfetti, Seth Jarvis, even. Like, there are so many good prospects that they passed on for Quinn. I do think Quinn's going to be a good top 6 forward in just a couple years' time, but yeah, I don't think he'll be as good as those centers that they passed on.
I did too, and I think had he been drafted at 15th, I think this would be a completely different conversation we're having right now. I mean, it'd be more so praising him than, kind of comparing them to these players. But
yeah, and it's not fair to him, but it's just the circumstances.
And with that, we're prepared to end the show here. Do you have anything left to add, Brandon?
No, I think I got all my stuff in. Yeah, I thought it was a great show. I'm all good.
Definitely. And with that, we thank you for joining us, as this has been Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Raiders. Make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube, follow and share us on Facebook, and follow the show on Twitter at Sabres Scoop THW. Make sure to follow Joe on Twitter at JoeTCBNHL and catch his Sabres takes as the draft and free agency are getting very close. And once again, make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter so you don't miss out on the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. And of course, you can't miss out on the great hockey content on thehockeyraiders.com. For Brandon and Joe, this is Jordan, and this has been Sabres Scoop. Until next time.